Good Shepherd Auditorium in Inwood, New York City, welcome to Inwood Artworks on Air. It's where I meet the musicians, filmmakers, writers, theater makers, and artists of all stripes who make their home in what we affectionately call Upstate Manhattan. I'm your host, Aaron Sims, and this is Live and Local. It's our podcast dedicated to showcasing the musicians in our neighborhood. We talk to them about what they do, and best of all, listen to them perform live in one of our favorite local venues. Today, we are excited to speak with musician and composer Robert Silverman. Robert was born in New Haven, Connecticut, and has been playing jazz, piano, trumpet, and singing, composing for almost 50 years. He is first mentored by the great Jackie McLean in Hartford, and then moved on to study at the England Conservatory in Boston, where he was fortunate to work with George Russell, Jaki Byard, Fred Hersch, Jimmy Guiffre, Brand Blake, and many others, and graduated from the Jazz Studies Department in '84. He moved to New York when he did graduate with work with Jimmy Heath at Queens College, and has been the recipient of many awards, including 2 Meet the Composer grants and a Brio grant in 2013 for Best Jazz Composer for his CD, Fractured Time. Mr. Silverman has released 15 CDs in New York City and also works with the elderly population and Alzheimer's patients in the Bronx. He's on the staff at 92nd Street Y and will soon be teaching at the Duke Ellington School in New York City, as well as releasing a new CD this year. We are thrilled to have him played live for you today. Ladies and gentlemen, Robert Silverman.
This one's Kansas City, Here I Come. Well, I'm going to Kansas City, people. Kansas City, here I come. Kansas City, Kansas City, here I come. They got some pretty ladies. I'm gonna get me one. Well, I'm gonna stand on the corner, 12th Street and Vine. Well, standing on the corner, 12th Street and Vine, with my Kansas City lady, bottle of good Kansas City wine. Might take a plane and I might take a train. If I have to walk, I'm gonna get there just the same. Kansas City, Kansas City, here I come. They got some pretty fine women. I'm gonna get me one. The Kansas City, here I come. Kansas City, here I come. All right. I'm going to Kansas City, people. Kansas City, here I come. Thank you. The second one I think I'll call, I decided to do something that I just make up on the spot. I'm going to call it Inwood Arts, and just play something short that I've never played before and trust myself like I used to do in the past.
Well, that was awesome. Thank you so much for the improv tribute. That was beautiful. Robert, it's so good to see you. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks. I just noticed you got a great theater voice there. Very resonant voice.
Thank you. It is the background I was taught. Inherited the pipes from my father, but the technique from many a mentor like you've had in your career. So I'm a lifelong theater practitioner, and so I guess you can't take it out of the guy.
Yeah, when I was, you would sound better on Kansas City than I did today. But when I was studying theater, I had a great director, and he always talked to me about projection,
right,
and like hitting the back of the room.
Sure.
And later, when I went to see Jason Robards, in the theater, he refused to wear a microphone.
Absolutely.
And he would just use the great voice.
What did you see Jason Robards in?
I saw him in Moon for the Misbegotten with Colleen Dewhurst.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Well, Jason Robards was maybe the best classical, well, I'll just say American actor in the 20th century. I mean, he was just phenomenal. I mean, he did define O'Neill for so many, including Hickey and the Iceman Cometh was his big.
Oh, that's
he
right.
originated the role, actually.
That's right. Yeah.
But I won't get into a big theater history lesson because it's all about you,
I like
not about
it.
Jason Raubar. But I appreciate the compliment, and you sounded just fine on Kansas City, Here I Come. So yeah, let's talk about what you just played there. You played Kansas City, Here I Come, and then you had a nice improv that you wouldn't have known it. It was beautiful.
Thanks. Well, I used to, when I went to the conservatory, it was funny. It reminded me, I've been listening to, these days, to a film by Cecil Taylor. And I can't say I like to play like Cecil at this point, very cacophonic right now. But Cecil did say something that was very enlightening. Just yesterday, he said, instead of practicing all this technique and discipline, you practice to be free at the moment of creation. It's just like an actor learning to Stanislavski and method acting, so they can be free with it when they're actually doing a performance. You could be loose and just act.
The easiest way of saying it is that trust the work.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? It's just like trust the work, and Meisner, Stanislavski,
Right.
whatever you're getting into shop talk again on the theater. But
Trust it,
but you trust you've done the work, and when you're up there, be present, right? Be present and let that work go. Don't, message sent, message received.
That's right.
You're right there, and it's plays are a lot like playing jazz, right? Like you can play Where the Saints Go Marching In any number of ways. It's never going to be the same way twice. You may try to replicate it twice, but it's going to be different in one performance slightly than another, no matter how perfect you could play it by meter. Do you know what I'm saying?
That's
your to just illustrate your point, right?
Yeah, I think what it is also, I was mentioning before I started, is that when you come to New York, especially, I'm a composer, so many tunes that I hand out to guys, like we're looking at the music when we're playing, and my musicians are looking. My most current stuff, I have to look at it to play it. But then I heard Cecil, he says, I think when you look at the notation as a symbol of what the music is, and you're spending all your time looking at that, it takes something away from the actual performance. So I was going to say is when I was doing these recitals at New England Conservatory, we used to do concerts there, all the classical pianists running around practicing, Schubert and Beethoven and Mozart said, hey, Robert, what are you going to play? And back in the 80s, I was into that phase, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know when I sit down at the piano, I'll find out. And this today was a big breaking point for me because I haven't been playing that way in a long time, just trusting myself to create. I've been very tune-oriented because the music scene in New York, everybody wants to be a badass player and play all the standards. And I do that at restaurants and things, but it's so nice to be free.
Yeah.
And I just said, I'm going to play one piece at least that just comes out of me on the spot. I could probably play that way for a half hour.
Yeah. Well, it sounded effortless on our part, and we're glad that we could foster that creativity and I won't call the inspiration for it because you're the inspiration because it begins and ends with you. But I was just thinking, when you're playing, it's as the piece evolved through it, there's been so many wonderful things, like different players in this neighborhood have composed things either for this podcast. Like I think you're the third or fourth person to actually play something original that was either inspired by the podcast or written for this podcast. And so I think that, I love the fact that, this neighborhood is an inspiration, and this and the people like yourself. Like I said, this podcast is all about featuring people who are making things happen, and that, like I said in your bio there, it's like you've had this, you're a composer, and you've had tons of mentors throughout your career, your 50 years plus. You've learned to trust yourself, and even you, like you're saying, sometimes you get locked in, right? And you have to have the confidence to say and give yourself permission to let it go.
That's right. That's right. And the great thing about this thing today was, as I said, we're free. You just told me 3 things, and so conceivably I could have done that whole piece for Inwood could have been the whole broadcast,
Right.
but I think more people like Keith Jarrett would play in that mode. When he played, he would just go on stage and create. And I'm hoping to find a venue. I'd like to find a venue where I could do that again. Go to a church and have or a space like this where people would come in. I'd say to myself, I'm not going to play tunes. I'm just going to play.
That's a big problem in our neighborhood. That's one of the reasons why I started Inwood Artworks, because I moved up here like you 20 years ago-ish, and I was like, wow, I got to go downtown or out of town to work. That was the way it was. And we all ride home the train together. The opera singers and the theater people and the musicians were all coming home at midnight between 1 a.m. from playing our gigs and doing our shows and saying, all right, time to make the donuts. Do it again the next day. So I wish there was a physical scene up here, because restaurants are great and we have our favorites. Like we're talking about our buddy Jason Minter ran Inwood Cafe for a while, and you played there for years.
Indian Road,
Indian Road, and
10 years.
Yeah, and then there's places in Riverdale like Ambio Bach, which is a great little place that has a nice music scene, and there's little places of hotbeds that support local artists here. But there's no venue where you can just show up going like, that's a cultural arts center first.
Yeah.
It's not, oh, well, we're going to arts after your salad, you'll get some art and culture. So we're working on that, but boy, I think it's taking some, I hope I see it in our generation. I hope we do. Yeah. But you know what? A storefront, and we can start there and move up from that. You know what I mean?
I have a dream that, like, the next place I live in, I'd like to kind of go back to the idea of the loft that like people like Sam Rivers and Ornette Coleman did. Of course, property is so expensive now. Is that I'd like to have a place, whether it be here or in Connecticut, where I could do house concerts or backyard concerts, and I kind of control my own venue, because after 38 years in New York of hustling gigs, I'd like to have my own little spot where I could, charge $10 or $15 at the door, to help with the rent, like those cats were doing in the 60s, and have my own little spot to determine. I'm very fortunate, because even when I play it, I play every Friday up at the Larchmont Yacht Club in Larchmont. It's been going on for a year. And I have to say that the people in there are very, very nice to me. I can play whatever I want, but it's not like I go in there and I play free like I did today. Because when you playing with another person, like a bass player, if I'm doing a duo with a bass player, you have to kind of relate or have the kind of relationship that you're going to go out free together. But in the restaurant, they've been very kind to me there, and it's been a year-long gig for me. And I travel out there, but someday I'd like to take over and have my own venue and do like home concerts. And where I don't know if it's going to be in Riverdale, if I can afford it, but somewhere I'd like to own a great piano, like a Steinway Baby Grand, and I'd like to have my own venue.
That's the thing, right? It's like, let me tell you right now, it's like, for instance, like I was approached by someone who has a co-op, and they say, we have commercial space in our building. Do you want to put an offer in for it? And I was like, what? and to your point, it's like, could you imagine like putting a Steinway in a co-op and having concerts nonstop? Do you know the hate mail I would get on a daily basis? Because no one cares. It's like the one person who thinks it's cool in the building, the 49 other people would want you out. The term "ride you out on a rail."
I'm getting that now. That's why I want to split.
Right. Before it's like I hear enough, of just people practicing in their own apartments, let alone creating a centralized area for everyone's ire. But you're right though. It's like how it'd be great, like the loft idea, some kind of somewhere that's hopefully sanctioned.
Or
so
even,
we don't
or
get
even
in
having it
trouble.
in a backyard.
That's what we did. That's how we started. Inwood Artwork started doing back porch concerts. I couldn't fit a Steinway on it. It's only 20 by 20. But that's how we started. We started doing variety shows, and we had keyboards. We ran power out the window.
Where was this?
218. In Inwood. That's how we started about 13 years ago. But that, you get rained on, and we actually recorded a podcast out there with a keyboard and an opera singer. If you go, for those of you who know Kirsten Chambers' concert, we did out there her podcast with Keith Chambers, and but yeah, the next person we started raining. We couldn't record the next podcast because we had the equipment out there and everything. So the point of the story is that porches and everything are great, but even that is like it's temporal in nature. Like there's got to be a dedicated space, and I'm working on it, folks. But like Robert just said, it's like real estate is really expensive, and I think that's why there's real. It's just not a state; it's really an expensive state.
There's a guy in my hometown. I'm from actually from Hamden, Connecticut. My brother-in-law was telling me right down the street on Manor Street, where I grew up, the guy there owns Best Video in Hamden, and he also runs, outside concerts in the nice weather. So that's where I'm from. So I'm, if I ever move back there, I'd be, wanting to do something like that. But I've been very fortunate just with my life in New York. I teach now at the 92nd Street Y.
Yeah, tell us about that.
For the past 14 years, it was kind of interesting when I was, I used to be on the staff of the Hebrew Home for the Aged for 11 years. And that's where I met a great guy that also turned out to be a mentor of sorts. I met Billy Taylor in there when he was recovering from a stroke. And we became very, very good friends. I'll have to send you the article that I wrote about Billy when he passed away called Playing for a King, because I used to go into his hospital room and turn off the television and say, Billy, could I play you something? Because so people won't get into that idea of just like spacing out, looking at TV, because it's not really right for old people to have to be, shoveled off like that in our society. It's a big thing.
Yeah.
And so Billy, became then somebody at the Hebrew Home and said, have you talked to Joe Brown at the 92nd Street Y? They might be interested in your jazz program, teaching jazz history. So I contacted Joe Brown, who's not there any longer, was the director of the Hyman Brown Senior Program there. And she thought that what I was doing was great and hired me. And I've been there ever since through a new person they have now too, and they really allow me to teach the whole history of jazz. I'm very excited about history and developments, and especially in people's families, and how, I got into Jewish music and Yiddish music, and how my family, if you really look at the history of jazz, when people were coming over from what's now Ukraine, but then it was then Russia, that really like the first jazz was being created in America. Scott Joplin. And then, I'm very interested in trends of music, and as we get to through World War I. And so I'm teaching that and moving somewhat chronology through my 14th year of teaching jazz history. And they've also added me to a program. They've started a new program working for early stages dementia people called PCSA, which is early cognitive stuff. And they've added my jazz history class to that thing too. So I have a really busy February coming up.
Sounds like it. Wow, that's awesome.
And what I do is usually do more vocal music for them. Like if I'm doing Embraceable You by Gershwin, I'll bring in the sheet, and then I'll play like a seminal recording of like Art Tatum playing it, and then I make sure that I know every tune. But as I said before, most of my life is very tune oriented, because people relate to the history of things. But there are many musicians, like you had on Rich, and people like in Inwood that are making new music. And I try to explain to people that people like Rich and myself, Robert, we're composers living in 2023 trying to write new music. But you would appreciate, as a theater person, there's not that avenue that like Jerome Kern and George Gershwin had. You can, even Sondheim, take your new songs to Broadway anymore.
No, it's ridiculous. I mean, it costs $500,000 just to do an off-Broadway musical with 7 people in it. Let alone doing. I mean, unless you have some severe backing behind it all. I mean, it's nearly impossible to premiere anything unless it's entirely subsidized. Like we need a Catherine de Medici. We need
that's right.
We need people,
patrons.
We need patrons, and I hate to say it, people are patronizing institutions more than people, and that's my main problem with philanthropy today. And I'll get off my soapbox now. But my point is, like, my hope is that they see you on this podcast, they find you and going, Robert Silverman, that sounds awesome. How can we go check him out and see what he can do, and maybe you guys become friends. Maybe you get married to somebody. I don't know. But it's like, but the point is like, I'm just silly here.
I've had that stuff happen.
But not. But you know what? Stranger things have happened. Let me tell you right now.
It's true.
And I wanted to just before we go down Crazy Pants Road here, there is that, again, going back to the trust. And going back to saying, like, yeah, but you have to still keep asking the questions, and you're the one who's guiding your own pirate ship, not somebody else. You can still write it, you can still do it. And today, 2022, like, you can create a cast album by yourself using Pro Tools or GarageBand or whatever, and rent studio time, whatever, and you can put together a concept album. You couldn't do that 30 years ago. That would have cost you an arm length to hire all these performers and all that stuff. So there's ways of putting yourself out there and getting things done that you couldn't do then. But one thing, a project I wanted to bring up that you spoke of too, that keep up the history and history of jazz, and also something that's meaningful to your history and other the Musings on Music project you did with Ed Menta. I thought that was a really interesting.
Ed wrote the preface of that of my book, because he's a theater person from Kalamazoo, Michigan. Is one of my best blues friends I had growing up. But Musings on Music was a book on jazz that I don't even know if I send this to you, because it's about a 30 or 40 page book that I wrote on jazz during the pandemic, and I used it for one of my classes. And the guy that actually got it rolling was inadvertently Jerry Stiller. Oh, wow. Yeah. Jerry Stiller was up because his wife was not well at that time. Ann Mara, may she rest in peace. I got friendly with Jerry Stiller, and I would play for him and Ann, and he was a lovely person. And he'd say, why don't you take your memoirs of all the people that you played with and all that and turn it into a book? Well, I started off with him, Jerry Stiller, because in those days, comedians like him would open up for jazz musicians in the Village. Yeah. And he was very nice. I said, do you want me to stop talking about jazz, Jerry? He goes, no, I love it. And so the whole book came in, and it mostly centered on great people that I've played with, people that I've got a chance to, Al Harewood, the great drummer, Billy Taylor, and people that I've rubbed elbows with and have influenced me. And I got a chance to play blues with Albert King. Ken would love that. I played with the Albert King Blues Band, and I've been knocked around pretty good, by some of these guys. And I paid some dues myself, from the guys that really were paying hard dues. In the blues world, I traveled with Ron Levy, who was B.B. King's pianist. So I feel like I've done so much, and I've had so many great mentors in my life, that when I teach someone, or especially I teach classes, I try to bring love and improvisation. Now teaching has become to me like an art form. The art, I don't know if you've ever got into heavy teaching, but the art form of like I've been studying jazz since I've been 14 years old. So now I come in with a little sheet of paper, and I go for an hour, because it's really my field. And if I start talking about it, like get into talking about Clifford Brown or Max Roach or B.B. King or Albert King, some of these people I've gotten a chance to play with or play with people that played with them. So I'm just very excited about, like Wynton is, like with the history of African American music, and I'm also excited about the history of Jewish music as it parallels African American music, and I'm very interested in parallel cultures and how cultures can work and do work with each other, not only chronologically but musically. Mm-hmm. For instance, to be more, like how, Billie Holiday would do a great song by, Jerome Kern. I'm very interested in the joining of cultures.
And how they've influenced each other.
Yes.
Totally. So tell me about this new album you have coming out.
Oh, well, the new album did come out during the pandemic. It's all on. I don't make any money from it because they put it out. It's all on YouTube. It's called The Inner Touch, and it features Chris Anderson on trumpet, who plays with Southside Johnny and the Jukes. That's his band. Scott Hamilton, Steve Dash on bass, and myself composing all the songs. The Inner Touch refers back to all of us, you, me, Ken. The inner touch is the creative sensibility that every person has within them that has to be touched, either by someone else or by yourself, as you just said. And I wrote all the music and kind of tributes on the album to Bud Powell, Charles Mingus. And I was really proud of the cats on the album because we got this record together during a pandemic.
Yeah.
And I had guys that were really dedicated to my music that would discuss with me, play with me virtually, back and forth until we got the tune. And then when the bands got lifted, we'd start playing in their homes again. And eventually I went to Brooklyn and recorded the whole new album, 2 or 3 sessions.
That's pretty amazing.
And put it out. And I'm so proud of those people for, believing in my stuff. The drummer has been with me for, 15, 16 years, Scott Hamilton, And we're still playing. Wow. Still playing at the Sugar Bar on February 15th, if you want to come down. It's my little ad.
Very cool, and I'm sure many more times as well.
Yeah, well, I've been playing at that place, the Sugar Bar. Another guy who's been really nice to me has been Jimmy Simpson, who's been Valerie's brother, has been booking me into the Sugar Bar for 18 years.
Wow. So
we've been doing about once a month for the past 18 years, and that's been a real growthful experience for me because I get a chance to play my own music there.
Yeah.
And so if I'm writing a tune like this week, we try to work it out, and by the 15th, the guys will play it.
Well, looking forward to the Inwood Artworks improv tune making its way into repertoire at some point.
Oh, and, yeah. Well, I could never play that again. That's the thing.
Course.
But I could play something. I could do a whole night of Inwood. If I had to sit down and play that, I could never. I don't know what it was.
No, you couldn't play it again. It's impossible. But actually, we have the recording of it now. You could actually, if you want to transcribe it
Someone
for yourself.
Some nerd somewhere in the
somebody,
country.
Yeah, exactly. but that's the point, though, is too. It's like, be free enough to do those kind of things. What's awesome about your album, I didn't know it already came out. I thought you had another. I knew that album came out. I thought you had another one coming out as well.
No, that's the last. That one came out in 2022.
Okay.
And it's like,
Well, it's 2023 now. That's what I'm saying. It feels like 1 year. Like it's like dog years, right? 3 COVID years is 1 real year.
Oh, yes.
It seems, right?
That's right.
That's like how it feels.
It's really, we made some copies of it, but you can listen to it if you're listening out there in radio or TV land. If you put in The Inner Touch, Robert Silverman, you can listen to all the cuts on YouTube and Spotify.
Very cool. So let's leave the people with one of your originals. By the way, you want to introduce it?
Oh, the last one that I played, that was from an earlier album called Blues for Horace, which is Horace Silver, who was who I got a chance to open for, one of the great jazz pianists of our generation that started off with Miles Davis and Art Blakey, and he just became Horace Silver and started, writing stuff for the American Indians and Black history, and I got a chance to play with him, and one of the funky jazz pianists that influenced my life.
Awesome. Once again, Robert Silverman.
This last tune I wrote for Horace Silver, the great jazz pianist, called Blues for Horace, and I had the great opportunity in my life to open up for him one time for Horace Silver. I didn't play this tune for him, but I got a chance to work with him on the same stage.
There you go, folks. A Robert Silverman original. And, Robert, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today.
Likewise.
Before we say goodbye, where can people go find out more about you and your work?
Well, I hate to say I don't have really a good website right now, but they can go to...
Where's that YouTube channel where they find your work? Yeah,
YouTube, or my Robert Silverman YouTube channel, SoundCloud, Facebook, and, Inwood Arts is sponsoring me now, I'll be, anyway, I'm in Riverdale. Find me. I'm the Robert Silverman playing the keyboard on Facebook. I'm a better composer than I am a businessman, so you got to find me, and I'm going to be teaching all over the place, playing all over, and also we're going to do a free concert at the 92nd Street Y on February 24th with most of the guys on the new album, Chris Anderson included, at 2 p.m. in the art gallery of the 92nd Street Y on Lexington Avenue.
Very cool. All right, listeners, you have your marching orders. Thank you so much, Robert. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks,
having you
Aaron.
here. You betcha. So, ladies and gentlemen, Robert Silverman. Yeah, we thank him for joining us on this live and local episode of Inwood Artworks On Air. Again, it's where we meet the musicians, filmmakers, writers, theater makers, and artists of all stripes that make their home here in Upper Manhattan. If you have a moment, please show us some love right now by rating and reviewing this podcast on Apple Podcasts. That really does help. Many thanks to Church of the Good Shepherd here in Inwood for hosting us, and to heightsites.com for uptown promotional support. You can support On Air and all of our programming by making a tax-free donation to inwoodartworks.nyc/donate or via Venmo. Be sure to follow us on social media at Inwood Artworks to keep up with all that we do, which includes the Inwood Film Festival, Filmworks Art Fresco, pop-up art galleries, live performances, and so much more. Inwood Artworks On Air is proud to be supported in part by public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council. And Inwood Artworks programming is made possible by the New York State Council on the Arts with the support of the Office of the Governor and the New York State Legislature. From the top of Manhattan and the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much for tuning in. This is Aaron Sims for Inwood Artworks On Air.